You are alive today because 40 years ago, your parents did not tragically die in a nuclear fire. They survived, and you were born, all because of a single broken instruction. Imagine a world where your city, your home, and everyone you love turned into radioactive ash 4 decades ago. This isn't a plot for a sci-fi movie. This was seconds away from becoming our reality on a dark night in 1983. The man responsible for your life didn't win a war. He didn't fire a single shot. In fact, he did the most dangerous thing a soldier can do. He refused to follow an order. Serpukhov 15, a secret bunker buried in the woods near Moscow. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of ozone and old electronics. Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov is staring at a giant red screen that is screaming at him. The word is launch. 1 American missile, then 2, then 4. 5 nuclear warheads are currently screaming across the atmosphere, targeted at Soviet cities. Each one is 30 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The Soviet Union's military doctrine is absolute. If the satellites detect a launch, the response must be immediate and total. Petrov has the telephone in his hand. One call to the Kremlin, and the Soviet nuclear arsenal, thousands of missiles, will launch within minutes. The clock is ticking. Millions of lives are balanced on the edge of a razor. The computer system, the most advanced technology of its time, says the attack is 100% real. All the sensors are green. The protocol demands action. But Petrov is looking at the screen, and he is betting the entire world on a single, desperate hunch. He thinks the computer is lying. If he's wrong, the Soviet Union is destroyed, and he is a traitor who did nothing. If he's right, well, no one will ever know he saved the world. To understand how a machine almost started a nuclear war, we have to look at the engineering behind the OKO system. In the early 1980s, Soviet scientists were incredibly proud of this project. It consisted of several satellites in high elliptical orbits designed to monitor U.S. missile silos around the clock. The system didn't use cameras in the traditional sense. It looked for infrared heat signatures. When a Minuteman missile launches, its rocket engine produces a massive plume of fire that can be seen from space. The OKO system was fine-tuned to detect that specific heat. But on that night, the universe produced a 1 in a billion coincidence. It was the autumn equinox. The sun, the Soviet satellites, and a specific group of high-altitude clouds over North Dakota aligned in a way no engineer had ever predicted. The sunlight hit the top of the clouds at a very specific angle. To the satellite's infrared sensors, the reflection of the sun looked identical to the heat from a ballistic missile launch. The computer didn't see a mistake. It saw 5 separate launches. In the bunker, Petrov was processing this data under immense pressure. He was an engineer, not just a soldier. He had spent years studying the logic of war. He knew that if the United States were to launch a first strike, they wouldn't send 5 missiles. They would send hundreds, a massive wave to wipe out the Soviet Union's ability to fight back. A 5-missile attack made no strategic sense. It was either the most incompetent invasion in history or a software glitch. Petrov looked at the flashing red lights. His fellow officers were already shouting, following their training, and waiting for the order to alert the high command. The manual stated that the computer was reliable. To doubt the machine was to doubt the Soviet state itself. But Petrov noticed something else. The ground-based radars, which look for missiles once they appear over the horizon, remained silent. If the missiles were real, the satellites were the first to see them, but the radars should have detected them soon after. He was trapped in a terrifying gap of information. The satellites said war. The radars said silence. The lives of billions depended on which machine he chose to believe.
Petrov picked up the phone. His hand was shaking, but his voice remained steady. He called the duty officer at the Soviet Army's headquarters and delivered his verdict. He reported that the system was malfunctioning. It was a false alarm. He didn't have a single piece of hard evidence. He had no data to back him up. All he had was his engineering background and a gut feeling that the world shouldn't end like this. Imagine the weight of that moment. If he was wrong, He would be responsible for the deaths of tens of millions of his own people. He would be remembered as the greatest traitor in the history of mankind. But he stood his ground. He told the commanders, false alarm. Now came the most terrifying part of the story, the wait. The computer had calculated that the missiles would hit in about 18 to 20 minutes. For those 18 minutes, the bunker was silent. Petrov sat in his chair, staring at the ticking clock, waiting for the flashes of light on the horizon that would signal the end of everything. He later said he felt like he was sitting on a red-hot frying pan. Every second felt like an hour. His subordinates were looking at him, waiting for instructions, waiting for the order to prepare the counterstrike. But Petrov did nothing. He just watched the seconds tick away. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. If the missiles were real, the ground-based radars would pick them up as they crossed the Soviet border. Petrov kept his eyes on the radar operators. Still nothing, they reported. Finally, the 20-minute mark passed. Then 25. The screen stayed clear. The sirens eventually died down. The world was still there. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Petrov had ever heard. He had been right. The most advanced system in the USSR had failed, and only his refusal to follow the manual had saved the planet.
After the siren stopped, Stanislav Petrov expected to be treated as a hero. Instead, he was treated as a problem. The Soviet military could not admit that its billion-ruble pride, the Oko system, had failed because of simple sunlight hitting some clouds. Petrov was interrogated for hours. His superiors didn't ask about his courage or his logic. They focused on the paperwork. They reprimanded him for not filling out the military logbook correctly during the crisis. In their eyes, a messy journal was a bigger crime than almost starting an apocalypse. Eventually, Petrov was quietly pushed out of the army. He suffered a nervous breakdown and retired to a tiny one-room apartment in a gray suburb near Moscow. His wife died of cancer, and for years he lived in poverty, surviving on a meager pension and cooking his meals on a small stove. The man who saved the world was spending his days standing in lines for bread, unrecognized and alone. The world only learned the truth in 1998 when a retired general published his memoirs. Suddenly, the secret was out. International journalists flocked to Petrov's dusty door. He was invited to the United Nations, where he was given the World Citizen Award. He met Hollywood stars and world leaders. But Petrov remained humble. He never called himself a hero. He always said, "I was just an engineer doing my job." He died in 2017, still living in that same modest apartment. His story is a powerful reminder. Even in an age of perfect machines and artificial intelligence, the most important component is still the human heart. History isn't just made by kings and presidents. It is made by individuals who have the courage to think for themselves and the strength to break a rule when the world is at stake. That was the story of the man who saved us all. Now, I have a question for you. Do you think a modern AI system would have made the same choice as Petrov, or would it have followed the protocol to the end? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and tell us what you want to see next: the secret logistics of the Roman Empire, or the future of Starship. See you in the next one.